Good morning, everyone. We are so thankful that you have joined us online. This is certainly unprecedented times, and so things are definitely a little different during 2020. But one thing that is in common is usually on the second week of November, I celebrate my anniversary with the congregation. And so, as you know, that every year I always buy all my elders gifts. And this year, they're not all here, but Rory is here and then Don Moore. So they will both be receiving this wonderful Yeti mug. And last year, I think I got them neck warmers. We got books, but I thought this was a great gift, and so they will definitely use this. And if you're like me, my coffee gets cold, and I want to keep it warm as long as I can. So 12 years I've been with you all. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for loving me, and thank you for being good to me for the 12 years. That is a long time, and we are all celebrate together because it is truly a partnership. I was in the gym and I was talking to a young man about how to get gains on the bench press. The goal was to get up to 200, which is a true status symbol for men. Because most people want to, if you lift weights, get past that 200 barrier. Now, it's not that hard for some individuals, but typically that is kind of a mental hurdle that you have to overcome. So as we were having that conversation, we were expressing different ideas on how to do it. And I certainly was not lifting 200 pounds back then. Now, in the conversation, typically you are kind of showcasing your background. And one of the things that we mentioned was, he asked me what I did. And I said I was a minister at a local Church of Christ. And he said he worked at a local factory. And I thought, fantastic, because I actually recognized the name of that factory because one of my elders was the manager there. I kind of dropped the name because I was looking to show how important I was, that I was a minister at this congregation. But his reaction shocked me. Because instead of him being impressed that his big boss was one of my church leaders or members of the congregation, he looked at me with kind of a flabbergasted look on his face and said, "That man's a Christian?" And then he stopped and said, "That man's the biggest liar I ever met in my life." Well, there goes me looking prominent, or there was a good impression I was hoping to make on him. He was shocked that my elder was a Christian, and I was shocked that my elder was not being a very good example. I was disappointed. When you think about the power of influence today, you can't control it. I don't know if that story or his perspective was really realistic. Maybe he said something in the workplace. Maybe there was some leadership issue. I'm not really that sure. If you even look at Jesus, it's hard to manage your influence. If you look at Christ and his life, there were some people that looked at him and said he was a drunkard. Said that he was eating with sinners and he was fraternizing with the wrong type of people. So some individuals, even with Jesus, did not consider his influence to be wholesome and holy. You also have some individuals, they could not wait to be around Christ. That you had sinners that gravitated towards him because of the love that he shared with them. That they had a huge following. That Christ had a magnificent level of influence in his world. But everybody had a different perspective on the influence of Christ. The Pharisees didn't want anything to do with him. They thought his influence was destructive in the nation. They were sinners that wanted to be with him, that wanted to have his attention. So when you look at influence, how you wield influence is a true skill of a transformed Christian. As we continue to look at our series, Wild Transformation, we would be amiss if we don't spend time talking about how we can influence this world for Christ. As we looked at kind of becoming part of God, belonging to God, and then we looked at certain characteristics that would help us to become like Christ, we got to look now at how we can bless others through the power of the Holy Spirit. How do we use our influence to help transform this world? It's truly a skill we have to learn. Because your influence is crucial. I think we should all look at this verse and realize how significant influence is. Look at this warning here in Matthew chapter 18, verse 5 to 6. Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me. But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and to be drowned in the depth of the sea. Jesus is making a bold point. If your influence causes a little one, in context to children, but I think this would apply to all people. If your influence is causing people to sin, it would be better for you to have a millstone fastened around your neck and to be thrown into the ocean, into the sea. Now, people knew that imagery in the first century. We don't see a lot of millstones today because we're not around the production of flour. But they would all have this picture in their minds of what a millstone looked like. You could have the millstone, which would weigh a few dozen pounds, or it could weigh a few 100 pounds. So if you have this weight around your neck, it is certainly going to be devastating for you. Your influence harms or helps people. Now, in the church, we kind of look at it that our influence as Christians are always perceived to be positive, and we always assign that the influence of the world is evil. And we almost have this animosity that is being stirred in our culture today. That Christian influence is good and that Christians need to do a really excellent job of mitigating the influence of the world that is on them. And that we have to protect ourselves from the worldly influence because it's going to corrupt our Christianity. And so we look upon the world with suspicion. But what has shifted is that the world looks back on the church and Christians and feels that that influence is just as destructive. People in the world are now trying to protect themselves from Christian influence because of their perception that Christians are hateful, judgmental, and they're bigots. And so they want to remove the Christian influence from American culture, and the church is looking at the worldly culture and wanting to remove that influence. And so we have this animosity about people contending with one another because they feel like all their other people's influence is corrupt. I think that's a major shift that we're seeing in society. It used to be Christians were harmless. They may not believe what Christianity was practicing and teaching, but what harm could it bring to the country? But now in our society, they believe Christian influence is harmful and hurtful to people. That causes us to have to really steward our influence better than ever before. To steward our influence, we got to look at three things: the light, the leaven, and our lives. If you look at the light, when somebody takes a picture of you with their iPhone, there's a little flash that may be somewhat bright, but it's not really that overwhelming. But probably a lot of you can remember before the days of iPhones that you would get these big cameras and there was always this massive flash at the top. And a good photographer had a large flash so that they could really regulate the pictures well. Now, we have probably all had our school pictures taken when we were kids, where we would stand there and somebody would say, smile, and you would open up your eyes, and all of a sudden that big old burst of light would come into your eyes, and you would be like, whoa, and it felt blinding. Or you tell kids, what do you not do? You don't stare up at the sun because it's going to hurt your eyes. We have all had somebody at a camp, some annoying kid, grab his flashlight and shine it in our faces and laugh. And we hate all of that because it's too much light that is directed at us. As Christians, we got to look about how we steward the light to the world. And sometimes we are so adamant of being the light that we overwhelm people with light instead of being the light of the world. Look at what Matthew says in 5:13-16. And you know these verses. These verses are very familiar to you. He's talking about being the light to the world and leaven to the world as we share our lives to the world. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand. And it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Jesus starts with this imagery of salt. And we all love salt. But we also understand that too much salt is actually bitter to us, and we want to avoid it. Nobody has ever enjoyed eating a salt packet, but we all love salted caramel. We want to have enough salt to add flavor, but we don't want to overwhelm the flavor with salt. And so, as Christians, we have to be wise in our influence so that the world doesn't feel threatened per se, or if we are becoming so over the top with our influence that we lose our saltiness because people back away from us. We have two concerns when it comes to our influence. Some people are not salty, and so they add very little influence to others, Christ-like influence, or they're too salty and people just pull away from them. Good transformation knows the level of saltiness in each relationship. You have to think about how much Christian influence to have and how to mitigate your influence around certain people. Because if you're too salty, you drive them off. But if you're not salty at all, They don't see any distinctiveness. Reminds me of when I first got married. Charity is an excellent cook, and she cooks for us. And she comes from a traditional family where the wife would cook, and then the man just ate whatever he had set before him. The problem was, I grew up in a family where if you didn't like what was for supper, you just cooked your own little meal and you would eat that. And so we had a lot of choice. And so it's kind of funny sometimes when you get married and you see that you have these different expectations. Because a good man, whatever his wife cooks, he just eats and he likes it. My thought was, well, my mother may cook something and she was challenged in her cooking. And so if I didn't like it, I just would find something else. So this one time when we first got married, Charity made this casserole. And I sat down and I looked at it and it didn't seem overly appetizing. And I remember I took a bite of it and I said, this doesn't taste good. I don't like this. Well, that's kind of like an unwritten rule. You don't complain about your wife's cooking. You don't say anything. You just eat it. That's what a good man does. And she's like, well, I cook, I worked. You think you could just eat what I've cooked for you and quit complaining. Yep. So I put another bite in, and Charity was finishing some things up in the kitchen, and I'm sitting there eating this casserole. And I'm just, every bite, it's hard. It's hard. And I got a good portion of this food eaten. And then she sits down, takes one bite of it. And she's like, oh, it's awful. I guess when she was cooking the noodles, she spilled too much salt in there. And the noodles were just salty, like she was trying to preserve them that had so much salt on there. And then she's like, oh, we got to go eat someplace else. Nobody likes too much salt, but everybody loves the potato chip. You got to balance your saltiness. Just like you have to balance the light. If we can go to the next slide. We need to balance the light in our life. Look what Matthew chapter 5, verse 14 to 16 says. You are the light of the world. The city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. The light is something that in America, in Western 21st century, we take for granted. We don't realize how precious light is. You've never struggled for light. You walk into your house and you turn on a switch and there is light. Even when you are walking outside, you pull out your iPhone and it has a flashlight. It's very rare for us to go for long, extended periods of time without the light around us. But in the first century, once the sun went down, you would have a little lamp. And these little lamps are not the size of what we kind of envision today. These are just little tiny, about this big, and you would light the oil on fire. And then it would kind of bubble up, the light would, and then it would give light to the entire room. But this wasn't these large light bulbs. These are not 40 watt, 60 watt, 100 watt lights that would just brighten up a room. It was enough light so you could not trip over yourself. And it was hard. Light wasn't just common, but today it has become common. I think sometimes in Western Christianity, We just assume Christianity is all around us. But are we just assuming people are the light? Or are we having true transformation where what we're giving them is not a watered down version of transformation? It is true, distinctive Christ-likeness. It's us really taking on the image of Christ. Because that's powerful. When you can be somebody and be light to this world, it is precious. Because nobody who is a seafarer, there has never been a captain that is coming into shore at night and sees a lighthouse and says, "Oh, I wish it wasn't there." When you're true light and you are not overwhelming, but you are the light, you are transformed, people appreciate you because you are making an impact for good. The second way that we steward our influence to this world is by being leaven. Look at what it says here in 1 Corinthians 5:6-8. Your boasting is not good. Do you not know that a little leaven leavens the whole lump? Cleanse out the old leaven that you may be a new lump, as you really are unleavened. For Christ, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed. Let us therefore celebrate the festival, not with the old leaven, the leaven of malice and evil, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. Now, he's talking about some sexual sin that is entering into the congregation, and he's saying that this little bit of leaven that is corrupt and evil can have a tremendous impact on the whole body of Christ. But a little bit of evil leaven can go a long ways. But good leaven can also extend and expand within a group. The leaven or the influence that we have, we can make an impact. But you notice that leaven is usually not seen. It works very much on a lower level of the subconscious. That it's not something that draws a lot of attention to itself, but it's always there making an impact and creating good or evil. If you think about your influence, and I think sometimes when we talk about influence as Christians, we usually put our influence in the good category. We all want to be, it's a wonderful life story. But when I look at my own life, I'm not sure if my life is the wonderful life. Not every single person that I've had contact with, and not every decision that I have made, and not all the people in my life could I say have been better because of me. I think a lot of our influence is on two ledgers. We have had good influence and bad influence. And if you go back to the millstone, sadly, I wonder about how my influence has negatively impacted people. What have some of the decisions that I have made in my life that actually have hurt people spiritually instead of blessed them? There's tons of times that we could sit back and think, oh, look at my good influence. Look at what I have done. All these people I have used good leaven, and they have really been blessed by that. But there's also been those times that my choices have led to negative outcomes for others. Think about your influence in high school. Maybe some of your decisions caused other people to take a path that they never pulled out of. I had a friend that I was in preaching training school with. Good kid, came from a good family. He was one of my closest friends while I was in school. I moved, got married, and he got a new roommate. His roommate one night decided that they should all smoke marijuana. Seemed pretty harmless to them at the time. Now I know what happened to the roommate. He moved on. Nothing ever really got too impacted in his life. But my friend became a drug addict. It was the gateway into stronger drugs, cocaine, heroin, and he threw his life away. I always sit back and think, if he never had that roommate, if his roommate never encouraged him to do that, what would his life look like today? When we think about our leaven, yes, we can be a positive influence. But have you had negative influence? Have you always been encouraging to everybody in the congregation? Have you always said the kind word? How has your influence leavened those around you? Paul warns Timothy in us. Look how powerful influence is. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 16. Keep a close watch on yourself and on your teaching. Persist in this. Now look at this. Look at this. For by so doing, you will save both yourself and your hearers. We always say everybody's responsible for their own choices. That's true. But how have you influenced those decisions? Have you been a beacon of light? Or have you showed others the path to negative choices? Because what we're aiming for is to share our lives with people. And this is what transformation is about. It's not so robotic. It's not something that we attempt to do. It is when we are leavened and when we are light, we just give our lives to people. People who have been transformed into Christ's likeness don't need to call attention to, I'm being a Christian influence in your life, and that's why I'm doing this. It is you living your life and giving that to others. What I love about John chapter 1, verses 1 to 5, it's called the prologue of the Gospel of John, is just how John mentions Jesus was God. He was God incarnated. You have this rich theology and these deep spiritual thoughts. But the essence of Jesus Christ is that he came to earth and lived with us. Look what it says, that which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked upon and have touched with our hands concerning the word of life. The life was made manifest, and we have seen it and testify to it and proclaim to you the eternal life which was with the Father and was made manifest to us. That which we have seen and heard we proclaim also to you, so that you too may have fellowship with us. And indeed our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son Jesus Christ. And we are writing these things so that our joy may be made complete. This is the message we have heard from him and proclaim to you, that God is light and there is in him no darkness. That is 1 John 1, 1 to 5. But turn with me to John Chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. You have in the prologue that Jesus is the light, but the dark could not overcome it. You have John reflecting on this, and 1 John 1-5. You have these two parallel accounts, and both of them are saying the same thing. Jesus is the life, and he shared his life with us, and we behold his glory. Jesus is so powerful because this idea of he dwelt among us is that he camped among us. He shared snacks with his disciples. He laughed with them. He slept in the same houses with him. He lived with them. And so he was transformed. He was light. He was leaven, because he shared his life. I think that's what we call everybody to. Is that for us to be Christians in this world, it's not to overwhelm people with our Christianity, but it's to be a Christian in a way that people are drawn to us. Now you may be wondering why I have an NSYNC picture up here. Let me tell you a story about Justin Timberlake. Now, I've never met Justin Timberlake, but I have one of my kids on my tennis team that I call Justin Timberlake. It's because in the summer we would always play together, and he was my partner. And I'd always tease him that he was the Justin Timberlake of our team, because we don't even know the names of the other people. And I always teased him, and I always said, "You're the star of the team. I'm just the other guy in NSYNC. But you're the star. You're the star." We laugh about that. But this young man, my job for the season was to coach him. But I noticed something about him. His family went through a divorce, and he didn't see his dad much. And every kid's different. Some kids on our team, I will yell at. "Come on, you know you need to win, man up, and I almost shame them into winning. Like, quit being lazy, go work harder." And some kids, and one kid especially, if I talk to him that way, he gets all, bowed up. It's like I'm challenging his manhood, and he goes out and he wins, and it gets him fired up. But not Justin. Justin needed male affirmation. And so I would talk to him during the matches and say, "I'm proud of you. You have this. You're doing so fantastic." And I needed to build him up because that's what he needed to hear. I was in charge of coaching him through this match in regionals that we had to win. And the coach, one of the other coaches, says, "I don't think he can win. Try to pull off," as he put, "a miracle." Justin won the match. But you know what was fascinating? Before he went out to play, he doesn't go to church. He looks at me because he knows I'm a minister, and he goes, "You're a minister," or he used the term pastor. Yep. He goes, "I would really like if you would pray for me, Coach." And we sat there before his match and prayed. After the match, he won. He wanted to call his mom and tell her, because it was a huge win. We listened to Bye, Bye, Bye on the way home. But I realized this kid needed a male figure to let him know that somebody was proud of him. There's so much as Christians we can do to build people up. I didn't need to sit there and preach to them, but I needed to be light, to have leaven, to share my life with him. I can guarantee you, every time now this song comes on the radio, bye, 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 he will think about that big win. And us driving home, celebrating, knowing that that song represents that he made his opponent go bye, bye, bye. There's so much that we can do as Christians to be that influence. That's transformation. That's sharing our lives. That's making light come to this earth. That is us being leaven. So let's challenge ourselves. That's what transformation is about. Not just so we can look holy, so that we can be Christ to a world that desperately needs it. Maybe it starts with you. I know you can't come forward, but I want you to ponder right now at home. Maybe on that ledger, right now, think about just this week. You have the positive ledger and the negative ledger. Where have you been most of this week? Where have you been with your wife? With your kids? Your co-workers? Where have you been with your attitude? It's so easy to think about all the positive, but we need to take control of our influence and think which ledger we're on. Why don't you ponder that as we don't stand, unless you want to stand and sing at home. Thank you for tuning in.